Hey guys, welcome back to Doc Lale Talks Comics. Sorry my energy is a little bit low today. I'm not exactly feeling the greatest. So hopefully we can get through this. Although it is going to be a shorter video because like I told you after I bought that copy of ASM number 1, the Golden Record reprint, that my stacks were going to be a little bit lighter each week. And this week actually only has 3 books and then another book that we're going to do a separate video on. So it will be a much shorter video than what I'm used to doing. Anyway, just want to say thanks for always watching these videos, always supporting the channel, and let's go ahead and dig into this stack, guys. All right, the first book is The Autumn Kingdom, The Wraithbound Queen, issue number 4, which completes this miniseries, and this was by Cullen Bunn with Christopher Mitten, and we get to see Summer and Winter, the 2 sisters, trying to save their father, and in order to do that they have to fight these creatures. I really love this story, and I love the idea and the concept. It's similar to Helen of Windhorn in that you're getting stories intertwined with reality. But at the same time, this has always been about family. It's always been about finding their father, who they're missing terribly. So you get to see the 2 sisters fighting these creatures, mixed in with the story of Elethriel, the heroine. And that was the story that her father originally wrote, was the story of Elethriel. And in the end, they do end up saving their father, and one of the girls says, you know, how does this adventure end? When does this adventure end? And he says, sweet girl, adventures like that, like hers, like yours, they just go on and on and on, and they never really end. So this was really a solid series. It was not a horror series like a lot of stuff that Cullen Bunn writes, but it was a story about family ties, a story about saving someone that you love, a story about, you know, trying to figure out what your own path is, where you're trying to go. And the art by Christopher Mitten totally hits it on the mark. It's meant to be almost like a story, like a child's storybook or something like that, but you get enough realism and you get to know who the characters are. They don't all look the same, and in the end you get to see a happy ending, which is a rare thing in life, in story. And sometimes I do believe that it is true that a happy ending is for a weak writer, but other times I'm glad to see things end on a positive note. So that was an amazing mini-series, and I'm glad that it ended the way that it did, and I kind of hope that we see a volume 3. This was really good, and I found a lot of interesting stories in the independent books as opposed to the major Marvel and DC books. So like I said, maybe we'll get a 3rd volume of this, and if we do, then I will be there for it. So Oni Press, Cullen Bunn, Christopher Mitten, you have your objective. Let's go ahead and see if we can get to it. All right. Something on the back of that book. Okay. Next one is Walking Dead Deluxe, issue 136. We get the continued fallout. This is written by Robert Kirkman with art by Charlie Adler, inks by Stefano Gaudino, and colors by Dave McCaig. And we get to see the continued fallout between what happened with Carl and the little boys that were trying to beat up Sophia. He protected her, but at what cost? Because he almost beat him to death. And then you get Jesus here and Marco talking about Ken, and Ken had been attacked by some of the, now we know of them as the Whisperers. And as they are going along, they get a better understanding that these Whisperers kind of meld in with the big groups of zombies, and they whisper to one another to let them know, they can kind of turn these zombies towards people or towards groups. And also, you get to see exactly how bad Sophia took a beating. So we're still moving forward towards the Whisperer War. We have not seen the main group of Whisperers yet, but they are heading towards Alexandria. You also get to see Carl strike up a conversation with Lydia, who was the Whisperer that Jesus found and brought back, and they've been interrogating her, and now they've got her locked away. And like I said, now you see some of the stray Whisperers have found the complex at Alexandria. So Carl is talking to his boss, and he says, thanks, Earl, he says, thanks for giving me the day off. And he says, I saw what they did to Sophia. There's a bit of gossip going around, but I know you, Carl, and I know Maggie. You're going to get punished enough. You and I are good. And he says, there's gossip? Yeah, you're Carl Grimes. There's gossip if you sneeze. So, in the end, the boy's father, who got the kids that got beat up by Carl, he eventually comes around and tells Gregory. I was trying to say George. I knew that wasn't right. Tells Gregory, you know what? I thought about it since the beginning of this. He didn't say it that way, but I've thought about it since the beginning of the story. And you know what? You're right. You're totally right that Carl Grimes needs to die, and we need to take control back from Maggie. But we have to make sure that we kill the boy. So. Really, really good stuff here. Continuing on with The Walking Dead in deluxe format, which means it's in color. Comes out every 2 weeks. If you never read the story, I think they're actually reprinting the trades in color now. So check that out, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. Oh, my nose. All right, next is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 28, written by Joe Kelly with art by Corey Smith and Francesco Manna. And Peter is trying to rest after his cosmic adventure, and then the whole Spider Carnage thing last issue from Death Spiral. And instead, here comes Doctor Strange to come back and remind him, hey, remember that deal with the Sons of Sidorak? Now you've got to run across town, and you've got to make it in time to go meet your former self so that you can save him. And so he runs across town, ends up running into Crusher Creel and Titania. It's one of those stories that you've seen 1,000 times before. Peter has to get across town by a certain point. He's got to meet somebody. He's got to be somewhere. And eventually, is he going to make it or is he not? He's up against the clock. And he eventually gets to the Four Freedoms Plaza, meets up with Ray and all of his cosmic friends, minus Rocket Raccoon, and they decide that they're going to head back to his apartment. But he said, but I've got one more thing I've got to do. Can you guys get back to my place without me? And she's like, but we need to see Times Square. And he's like, we will do, he said, directly to my apartment. We'll do something afterwards, I promise. And on a different note, haven't we done this with Wolverine before where we broke his claws? And if I'm not confused, aren't his claws sheathed in adamantium again? So how did they go back to bone claws? Maybe I should have been reading Wolverine. And lastly, does this not look like a Mark Teixeira drawing rather than something from Dan Panosian? Not knocking it. That looks great, Dan. But it just looks like a Mark Teixeira kind of thing. Maybe it's the lighting and the coloring on that. So then we get Brian Nearing, and he's sitting in the shower, and he's covered in mushrooms and spores. And he's like, I need to go back to the hospital. I shouldn't have left the hospital. And the spores are talking to him and says, you are strong, Father. We are strong, and we are strong together. And so then Brian says, prove it. So apparently Ben Reilly messed up more than he knew, because there are checks and balances in places like where he's working. And that way, if somebody screws up, then they can always go back and find who did it. And in that process, they came to find out that there was code that was written to sabotage the process that Brian was doing. It says, looks like the programming was done by two different people. At best, you have split personalities that code differently. Worst, best, you were outsourcing the programming, taking credit for it. Unethical, but more likely. And worst, you vibe coded with AI, which makes me want to throw up in my mouth. And he has to give up his badge at RAND while they're going through this process of trying to figure out who did what and how did Brian get so sick. Meanwhile, Ray and company go to Times Square. Spidey makes it just in time to save his prior self, and then he gets to meet Kintsugi again. We learn what Kintsugi is, and that is a process where if pottery breaks, if something breaks, then when it is veined, we'll say, with gold and repaired with gold, it makes the entire thing stronger than it originally was. Kintsugi says that as well. When something breaks like pottery, there's like this Japanese art where they use gold to put pieces back together. It makes it stronger than before, and it's a reminder that our flaws and our cracks, they make us stronger. And in the end, Peter is positive. He says, you heard the kid, cracks make you stronger. Hang in there, everything's going to be fine. So next up, we have Peter going up against his friend Brian, who's now known as Spore. So we'll see whether he can save him, because he wasn't there during that time. He never meant for his friend to get hurt. So can't wait for 2 weeks to see what's going on with that. Now, I did read at the back of the book that they said JR has moved on to other projects because he's got like that book with Mark Millar that he's working on. So hopefully they can get JR back on the title, pretty soon. But hey, he was here for a long time, and hopefully he'll get a chance to come back and work on ASM some more. So that's my 3 books for this week. And then in an upcoming video, I've got Comics the Magazine, issue number 3. So we'll talk about that book here in just a little while in another video. This book is pretty good, and it reminds me a lot of Wizard Magazine, but we'll dig deeper into that in the upcoming video. So like I said, guys, thanks for joining me. I know this was a short week. A lot of them are probably going to be short like that simply because I have to pay off that ASM, and I had to juggle new books with old books and juggle the opportunity to get something that I really, really wanted. And that is a book that I will hold and cherish in my collection forever. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe on these videos to get all of my upcoming videos. And we will catch you later.